Episode 80. As the Hogwarts Express pulled out of the station the next morning, Hermione gave Harry and Ron some surprising news.
I went to see Professor McGonagall this morning just before breakfast. I've decided to drop Muggle studies.
But you passed your exam with 320%, said Ron.
I know, sighed Hermione, but I can't stand another year like this one. That time turner, it was driving me mad. I've handed it in. Without Muggle studies and divination, I'll be able to have a normal schedule again.
I still can't believe you didn't tell us about it, said Ron grumpily. We're supposed to be your friends.
I promised I wouldn't tell anyone,
said Hermione severely. She looked around at Harry, who was watching Hogwarts disappear from view behind a mountain. 2 whole months before he'd see it again.
Oh, cheer up, Harry,
said Hermione sadly. I'm okay, said Harry quickly, just thinking about the holidays. Yeah, I've been thinking about them too, said Ron. Harry, you've got to come and stay with us. I'll fix it up with Mum and Dad, then I'll call you. I know how to use a telephone now.
A telephone, Ron, said Hermione. Honestly, you should take Muggle studies next year.
Ron ignored her. It's the Quidditch World Cup this summer. How about it, Harry? Come and stay and we'll go and see it. Dad can usually get tickets from work. This proposal had the effect of cheering Harry up a great deal. Yeah, I bet the Dursleys would be pleased to let me come, especially after what I did to Aunt Marge. Feeling considerably more cheerful, Harry joined Ron and Hermione in several games of Exploding Snap, and when the witch with the tea cart arrived, he bought himself a very large lunch, though nothing with chocolate in it. But it was late in the afternoon before the thing that made him truly happy turned up.
Harry,
said Hermione suddenly, peering over his shoulder,
what's that thing outside your window?
Harry turned to look outside. Something very small and gray was bobbing in and out of sight beyond the glass. He stood up for a better look and saw that it was a tiny owl carrying a letter that was much too big for it. The owl was so small, in fact, that it kept tumbling over in the air, buffeted this way and that in the train's slipstream. Harry quickly pulled down the window, stretched out his arm, and caught it. It felt like a very fluffy snitch. He brought it carefully inside. The owl dropped its letter onto Harry's seat and began zooming around their compartment, apparently very pleased with itself for accomplishing the task. Hedwig clicked her beak with a sort of dignified disapproval. Crookshanks sat up in his seat, following the owl with his great yellow eyes. Ron, noticing this, snatched the owl safely out of harm's way. Harry picked up the letter. It was addressed to him. He ripped it open and shouted, "It's from Sirius!" "What?" said Ron and Hermione excitedly. "Read it aloud." "Dear Harry, I hope this finds you before you reach your aunt and uncle. I don't know whether they're used to owl post. Buckbeak and I are in hiding. I won't tell you where in case this owl falls into the wrong hands. I have some doubt about his reliability, but he is the best I could find, and he did seem eager for the job. I believe the Dementors are still searching for me, but they haven't any hope of finding me here. I am planning to allow some Muggles to glimpse me soon, a long way from Hogwarts, so that the security on the castle will be lifted. There is something I never got around to telling you during our brief meeting. It was I who sent you the firebolt."
"Ha!"
said Hermione triumphantly.
"See, I told you it was from him."
"Yeah, but he hadn't jinxed it, had he?" said Ron. "Ouch!" The tiny owl, now hooting happily in his hand, had nibbled one of his fingers in what it seemed to think was an affectionate way. "Crookshanks took the order to the owl office for me. I used your name, but told them to take the gold from my own Gringotts vault. Please consider it as 13 birthdays' worth of presents from your godfather. I would also like to apologize for the fright I think I gave you that night last year when you left your uncle's house. I had only hoped to get a glimpse of you before starting my journey north, but I think the sight of me alarmed you. I am enclosing something else for you, which I think will make your next year at Hogwarts more enjoyable. If ever you need me, send word. Your owl will find me. I'll write again soon. Sirius. Harry looked eagerly inside the envelope. There was another piece of parchment in there. He read it through quickly and felt suddenly as warm and contented as though he'd swallowed a bottle of hot butterbeer in one gulp. I, Sirius Black, Harry Potter's godfather, hereby give him permission to visit Hogsmeade on weekends. That'll be good enough for Dumbledore, said Harry happily. He looked back at Sirius's letter. Hang on, there's a P.S. I thought your friend Ron might like to keep this owl, as it's my fault he no longer has a rat. Ron's eyes widened. The minute owl was still hooting excitedly. Keep him? He said uncertainly. He looked closely at the owl for a moment. Then, to Harry's and Hermione's great surprise, he held him out for Crookshanks to sniff. What do you reckon? Ron asked the cat. Definitely an owl? Crookshanks purred. That's good enough for me, said Ron happily. He's mine. Harry read and reread the letter from Sirius all the way back into King's Cross Station. It was still clutched tightly in his hand as he, Ron, and Hermione stepped back through the barrier of platform 9 3/4. Harry spotted Uncle Vernon at once. He was standing a good distance from Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, eyeing them suspiciously. And when Mrs. Weasley hugged Harry in greeting, his worst suspicions about them seemed confirmed. I'll call about the World Cup, Ron yelled after Harry as Harry bid him and Hermione goodbye, then wheeled the trolley bearing his trunk and Hedwig's cage toward Uncle Vernon, who greeted him in his usual fashion. What's that? He snarled, staring at the envelope Harry was still clutching in his hands. If it's another form for me to sign, you've got another. It's not, said Harry cheerfully. It's a letter from my godfather. Godfather? Sputtered Uncle Vernon. You haven't got a godfather. Yes, I have, said Harry brightly. He was my mum and dad's best friend. He's a convicted murderer, but he's broken out of wizard prison and he's on the run. He likes to keep in touch with me, though. Keep up with my news. Check if I'm happy. And grinning broadly at the look of horror on Uncle Vernon's face, Harry set off toward the station exit, Hedwig rattling along in front of him for what looked like a much better summer than the last.